Okay, I think we're live. Good morning from Seattle. How's everyone doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Hello from Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
How's your weather over there?
We have great weather, always sunshine, 30 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
Now it is rainy, of course. It rains. It's dark and rainy.
Dark and rainy.
I need some summer here.
Yeah, we actually have a nice day here in Seattle. It's sunny, which is a miracle.
Nope.
Awesome. And it affects the bandwidth.
Amir,
Yeah.
Jason, how's it going? Jason, you're down in San Diego,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's going good. Down in San Diego, we actually have rain today, so quite a bit of rain. So right there with you.
Really?
So yep. It's a overcast, gloomy, wet day.
You know, my little brother used to live there, and he's told a lot of stories about like surfing in the streets when the rain gets a little too intense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it rains, it has a tendency to rain a lot, and when it does, we flood, for lack of a better word. So,
Amir, what's up?
Hey, sorry, that internet was a bit choppy there, but not much. I'm in Toronto, Canada. Beautiful day, nice sunny day, good for bike riding and, you know, doing some hiking too.
Yeah.
And staying indoors and doing some Kubernetes stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'd like to be outside right now. I'm gonna get my sunshine by proxy here.
Yeah.
So we might as well start kicking this off. I think we're a couple minutes past the hour. We are going to be doing a live stream for about the next hour or so on the topic of getting better visibility in Kubernetes using Prometheus, Grafana, NGINX. And so kind of before we get started, you know, where is this coming from? So NGINX, which is part of F5, is doing a 5-week kind of like virtual festival of microservices activities. And so we are in week 2. March has 5 weeks this month. Marco, can you pop up the visual for that and share the link? So we've got, last week we did kind of an interview with one of our customers, ZipWhip, that's using Kubernetes in production. So kind of finding out how they went through that journey and how they were successful. This week, obviously, we're here talking about visibility in Kubernetes. Next week, we'll be doing webinars over on our platform at nginx.com on the fundamentals of microservices. So we've got a couple of experts who are going to be taking us from like base level, 101 level of what is all this stuff, how does this technology work, how's it different from, you know, legacy application development. And then the following week, also on our platform,
internet hiccup.
Yep.
Frozen.
Jen
Yeah.
Ward is there.
Yep.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. So it's not the transatlantic line that is disconnected. So next week we'll have cookies and.
There we go. Are we back?
Oh,
There we go. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I was frozen. I didn't even know it. Jumping over the chat here, I see we've got people from all over. Kathmandu, Nepal, Egypt, Italy, Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Nice.
Welcome, everyone. Those are all places I'd love to go visit. Anyway, so I don't know quite where I cut off, but we've been talking about Microservices March. This live stream is part of that. So we'll be doing a panel during the 4th week of March on the benefits to business growth by bringing in microservices. And then finally, rounding out the 5th week of March, we'll be back here on YouTube for a live stream on traffic. So with that said, if you want to check out the full schedule, we have the bit.ly link there, bit.ly/microservices-March. So what are we here today to talk about? Visibility. We have kind of a little 4-part program planned. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat to see what your questions are, if you want to talk about anything. So we're going to first start off with a conversation with Ward and Jason and Amir, who I'll let introduce themselves in just a moment. We're going to be talking about visibility challenges and solutions. We're going to look through a couple of use cases. So the first use case is help, my app is slow. And the second use case is help, I'm running out of resources. And then we'll answer your questions about Kubernetes, NGINX, Grafana, what it's like to live in Toronto, Amsterdam, San Diego, and Seattle. So with that said, my name is Jen Guile. I work in the Microservices go-to-market at NGINX. And so I'll pass it over to Amir. Amir, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amir. I do technical marketing at NGINX. I'm a subject matter expert for all things NGINX and Kubernetes, or in monolithic environments, whether it's on AWS or in the cloud or VM. And I also do a lot of application development as well. So I can kind of relate to developers that are deploying apps in Kubernetes and looking to have visibility and tracing to pinpoint, and troubleshoot errors faster.
Thanks, Amir. Let's take it over to Jason Williams down in San Diego.
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Jason Williams. I'm the product management engineer for microservices at NGINX, which encompasses both the NGINX Ingress Controller as well as service mesh. So a big part of my daily task and responsibility is to do a lot of research, interact with our customers, find out requirements that they have, any challenge they have related to microservices, and then take that information back and work with our development and development team to prioritize and figure out what we want to put in our products to improve the experience and quality of our what our users get with NGINX, as an ingress controller, as a service mesh.
Great, thank you. And flipping over, last but not least, to Ward out in Amsterdam.
Yeah, indeed. So based out of Amsterdam, and so we know our way around a lot of water. So I'm a lead solutions engineer. So that means that I'm helping every day Grafana customers evaluate our products and services. And of course, I like all our products, but I definitely have a soft spot for Grafana Loki, which I'm also going to talk a little bit about today. And also, as a shameless plug, I like to create demo videos. So check out the Grafana YouTube channel after the webinar for some videos that I created recently. Let me know if you like it, and definitely always like and subscribe.
Yeah, I watched a couple of your videos the other day. They're really good. So definitely get over there, as he said, after the webinar.
After.
All right. So,
yeah, so did I.
Did you?
Yeah, the videos are pretty cool. I like them.
Yeah, Loki's a pretty cool new product. So it'll be great to hear a bit more about, for those of you who are familiar with Grafana, what this new Loki product is, what it does. So let's kind of jump in. Actually, I'll take a pause for a second. We are going to be having an opportunity to win some swag later. So we'll be talking about that toward the end. And also, options for all of you out there to connect with us offline, talk about the roadmap for NGINX or for Grafana. So we'll talk about that toward the end. I see we've got more people joining from India, from Ghana, very cool. Colombia, nice to have you all here. So let's go ahead and jump into this first section talking about visibility challenges and solutions. So I'll just kind of pitch this question out to the group here. Why do you think people struggle to get visibility into their Kubernetes apps?
I guess I can kind of kick this off. So
yeah, go for it.
When I run, for example, into an a problem into my application, and that's just one application, I just go to see what's wrong and try to troubleshoot. But if you have, say, 10 to 20 services running in Kubernetes, and each one of them is generating logs, you can imagine how complex that would be, looking into every log of every service and trying to figure out what went wrong. So, as you, decouple your application, and as you have more services, and say, 5 services that are involved in one transaction, it becomes more difficult to pinpoint and troubleshoot those bottlenecks. So we need a a solution or a tool that can, aggregate that data and provide insight with that data, so that we could, first of all, set yourself up for success, so that you can find those bottlenecks early and do something about it before most people do. So stay ahead of the competition in a way, and really just have more insight and visibility into your application. And it's just harder with microservices. So that's what Grafana and Prometheus comes in.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like you're saying you want to start, like when you're building out your Kubernetes environments, like build in your insight, your visibility capabilities from the beginning there. It's just going to get more complicated the more apps you add.
Correct. Yeah, the more microservices you deploy in Kubernetes.
Oh, I think we lost Amir. Or is that me frozen?
No, I think he's frozen.
Sorry, Amir. He'll come back.
No worries.
He's back.
I think I really fully agree.
Anyone hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you
Amir.
again. No, I was just saying, Amir, I actually fully agree with your points here, right? So we really see an explosion of data, especially a lot of the folks that I talk to day. You see enormous amounts of logs and metrics, and these can be very useful, but you really need to have good tooling to find that needle in the haystack, and also focus on the right things to measure, to track, to log, because otherwise it can be overwhelming pretty fast, and then you're just generating a lot of data without paying for it, but not getting a lot of value out of it. So that is really key, making sure that you are generating a lot of information, but also being able to get a lot of data out of it, a lot of use and value.
Yeah, so you said it's important that you focus on the right things. What do you think the right things are?
Yeah, so if I look a little bit on a lot of the conversation is also around what's the difference between monitoring and observability, or how can you get from data actually to information, or visibility to insight. And that is really something we think a lot about, and I also think a lot about. So it's definitely useful, right, to keep eyes on stuff like performance metrics, or like CPU usage and disk usage and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it really, the insight, what you want to create is to get insight in how that affects the end user. So at Grafana Labs, for example, we're big fans of the RED method. I'm not sure if everybody knows that, but that's a microservice-oriented monitoring philosophy that is actually created by the VP of Product, Tom Loki, in 2015. And what it does is that for every resource, we monitor rate, errors, and duration. And that really helps us, using all those metrics and logs and that kind of stuff that's available, to really create a good proxy to know, and that proxy is for the user satisfaction. And we want to know how anything that happens within our applications, within our complex microservices stack, how that affects the end user.
So we've been tossing around a couple words just initially as we're talking here, visibility, insight. I think they get interchangeably used a lot. And there's, of course, a lot of other terminology like telemetry. So I'll pitch this out to the group. What do you think the differences are between visibility and insight?
I'll start first on that one. So I think there's a couple different pieces, and I agree with what Amir and Ward said, because the idea being is when we're focused on Kubernetes, which is incredibly complex across the board, and Ingress being that main entry point into your cluster. So there's a couple of things that we want to be able to provide. We want to be able to tell you what's going on with the Ingress controller itself, any problems with it that are going on, so you can be aware of that. Because if that Ingress goes down, no traffic's going to get into your cluster. So we want to make sure you are aware of those issues. The second part of that is, the other half of that is NGINX Ingress routing to your pods for your applications at the back end, so we can give you visibility onto what's going on. So I think there's a couple things here. At the first, I'll say is that we want to help people be aware of what's going on with the Ingress controller and your pods, right? So you get that, as Amir said, you're you're seeing something as it's going on instead of, hey, oh, something broke, now we got to go figure it out what it is. So if we can provide that information to you up front and you start to notice a problem, you can triage it and start to take a look and resolve it quicker instead of having a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to Jason's point, because the NGINX controller typically sits in front of the application, so everything will flow through that. And so we're coming out with new metrics every release in Prometheus, and there's a lot of factors that play into Kubernetes, and we come out with those metrics per release, and so you need that visibility that sits in front of the application to make sure all the traffic flows through there, and then of course make use of that data by exporting it to other tools that can actually graph it, like Grafana or Datadog or whatever the case may be. So it has that flexibility. To me, it's like a central engine. NGINX is like a central engine that is in the middle, and so but then you can kind of integrate that with other third-party tools to kind of take it even further. And it really depends on your stack, what technology you're using. So you have that flexibility there.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, so that is really key, right? So service mesh, ingress controller, because you have those types of services, and you create a standard way of communication in a complex microservice architecture. And if you look at it from the Grafana point of view, we can do a lot of cool stuff with correlation, but we can only do that if there's consistent metadata along the metrics and the logs. So if every application, so every microservice application defines their own way of communicating between the services, that makes it really hard to do very consistent, easy navigation. However, if you use a standard way to do the service mesh and do the ingress, that really helps with the correlation, because that automatically gives you that standard metadata that can be used and is consistent between all those services. And yeah, I really think that is key, and that really adds a lot of value. And in the end, of course, makes you just the life of the people that need to monitor and operate that Kubernetes cluster much easier.
Yeah, so you've done, all of you have kind of done a really good job establishing why you would want to use the ingress controller for visibility. Touched just like a little briefly on service mesh. How do you use a service mesh for visibility?
Is that a question for us, Jen?
Anybody.
Yeah, and so what's the visibility for service mesh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that falls right into the microservices category, right? Where when you implement a service mesh in your Kubernetes cluster, you've added another element that you need to be aware of, because as the traffic is traversing through your sidecar proxies, you want to make sure that traffic is working and you're not having a problem. So by us being able to tell you through tracing or some of the logging that we have, you can actually be notified, like, hey, there's a problem with these sidecars, something's not working. Because if you break your east-west traffic, it's just as bad almost as if you're breaking north-south traffic, right? Because you may be able to get into the cluster, but if your east-west is broken, you're not going to have any response back. So being able to see what's going on inside east-west is also just as important if you're deploying a service mesh.
Yeah, it's giving you some granularity, right?
Yeah, which you really need.
So what types of sources do you advocate that people should use in order to get visibility?
I'll start first with that one. So for this case here, we're talking about NGINX Plus as an ingress, and there's a couple of, and Grafana as well. So visibility with NGINX Plus, we have a nice tool that we're showing during the webinar, a dashboard. It's a quick heads up display that's available on all instances of NGINX Plus deployed in your infrastructure. And you'll see it's almost, I would say, it's like that first step. When you're starting to look and troubleshoot something potentially as a problem in your cluster. Is there something wrong with my ingress, or is there something wrong with my upstream pods that I'm routing traffic to? So I would think that would be step one. And the other half of that is the Grafana piece, which gives you much more deeper capabilities to sift through logs, triage, history. What am I seeing even further that helps me troubleshoot potentially more issues in my cluster that I may not be aware of. So combining two together, I think really is going to help customers identify issues, right? We say visibility, identify and provide visibility any issues going in the cluster.
So like a combination of real time and historical, right?
Right.
Sorry,
in today's world, I think real time is almost imperative, just in the nature of how fast everything is moving, and Kubernetes is, complex. I think it's almost a requirement these days to have your data instantly.
Yeah, that is a good point, because on Kubernetes, what you see is that the lifetime of application is really short, right? There's a lot of the kind of restarts happening, and especially in scenarios where not everything is healthy. There's a lot of stuff that is happening at the same time, and if you indeed don't have a real-time view on that, it's sometimes even harder to troubleshoot. So that is also something we're really focused on with Grafana Labs, is to providing a real-time view. So using those logs and metrics coming out of, for example, the NGINX Ingress controller, and using that and be able to analyze and chart that in real time, and provide that additional detail and context. And then, of course, we also see companies, when they're getting more experience, like with Kubernetes and microservices, they also tend to, at some point, look at, for example, distributed traces, which also makes it getting some more additional detail on the request flow within a highly microservice architecture.
Agreed. Great points.
Ward, how about you walk us through a little bit more about Grafana's view on visibility and observability? Yeah,
Grafana really takes a different approach than a lot of vendors, I think, in the observability space, because we at the core, we're open source, and we also have a big tent approach, and that is really core to our way of thinking. So we want people to have full control on their observability strategy, because it's every vendor, they want people to use their database, their visualization tool, and completely lock in. We think that's not realistic. Every company has a lot of different types of tooling, and we want to just extend to the specific tools they prefer to use. And our role really is to make sure that they're able to bring it together and understand and correlate their data, of course, in Grafana as the visualization tool. But no matter where your data lives, and just leave the data at the point where it makes the most sense. So that is really our approach there. And we do have a little bit of preference. If people are asking, okay, which logging solution do you like? I like Grafana Loki, for example, a lot, but there might be very good use cases for Elasticsearch or for Splunk, and that's perfectly fine. We just want to make sure that it's all usable and as effortless as possible to correlate within Grafana.
Yeah, we're big fans at NGINX of making it easy for NGINX to integrate with the tools that you're using already, which is why we integrate with Grafana, why we use Prometheus. I want to call out a quick question that's an important one from the chat about how this is relevant to the open source variant. About half of what we talk about today is going to be relevant to the open source. So definitely, if you're an open source user, please stick around. Jason, let's flip over and talk just in brief before we jump into the tech. Why do we advocate? What are? I think you've kind of touched on it already, but why use NGINX for visibility?
Yeah. So NGINX plus just NGINX itself, Jen?
Both.
Both. Yeah. I think there's a couple different pieces to that. One is NGINX has been around for a while, and it's a very fast data plane. It's a very reliable data plane. And I think it's the most widely deployed ingress on the market today. If you combine the open source plus the enterprise version, it provides a lot of functionality. And it does give you both open source and the enterprise version do provide you some metrics that you can provide and get that visibility into your clusters. Obviously, enterprise has a little bit more, but using those capabilities plus a very fast data plane's been on for a long time is basically why our customers love to use NGINX as their ingress.
Awesome. So in just a sec, we're going to switch over and start showing the technology, but I want to do a quick check-in for anyone who's joined late to let us know where we are, what we're doing. So we just finished talking about the considerations around Kubernetes and visibility. We're going to spend the rest of the session today on some use cases for visibility. So that's going to be looking at diagnosing what's causing an app to be slow, diagnosing why you might be running out of resources. And of course, again, we're going to be giving an opportunity for you to connect with the team to help us shape our roadmaps. And so stick around for that info. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jason. We're going to be talking about dealing with this problem of needing real-time data on the health of your apps. And he's going to walk us through how you can troubleshoot a slow app using the live monitoring dashboard. So Jason, take it away.
All right, perfect. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks everybody. So just to kind of highlight what we set up here. So basically we've deployed a basic kind of demo environment in GKE that's going to highlight the NGINX Plus specific dashboard that's I'm going to walk you through here in a moment, and also the integration to Grafana. And at the very end, I will walk through what I actually stood up, how I created it, and then we'll provide that those documents. So if you wanted to try this out, it's basically there for you to test. So as I mentioned earlier, NGINX Plus has its own dashboard that comes with the enterprise version, and I'm going to just walk you through what this looks like. So at a high level, this is the landing page or where you first land on, and it gives you some basic information about what you're actually running, some important information, such as the version you're running. So we're running R23 here. The amount of connections that are currently going through. So in this case, these are the connections actually going through my NGINX controller. As I run it, and I'm going to send some data through this, so you'll see these numbers change. And then what are we talking about from requests? And you can also see that we have the total number accepted as well as total connections. And then we can toggle back and forth to see if we have anything SSL going through as well. So you can see I've got total number of handshakes, any handshakes that have failed, and sessions reused. So this is good to give you an idea of what is actually going through your NGINX controller. So let me just do, I'm going to run, you're going to see these numbers jump. But I just want to show you that there is data going through here. All right. So you can see here, these numbers jumped up. I'm basically sending a little traffic through it. So you can see this actually is a real-time monitoring dashboard. And as we talked earlier, this helps you to see what's going on. So where I'm going to navigate you to is to the upstreams block up here. And for those that are actually familiar with NGINX and have configured it in the past, these would be your upstream blocks for the servers that you would put in there. And basically, it's the same thing in the ingress. We've just done a little bit differently here. So you can see I've got a couple different upstream groups. I've got one for, we have a simple cafe coffee demo that you see here. We also have one for tea. And associated with each of these upstream blocks are the pods that are associated with each one. And as you hover over these, we're going to give you some information about that pod that's pretty important, such is it up, any problems, is it down? So each one will have unique information to it to let you know anything about that, okay? And then with each column, we provide you with some critical information, like the total number of requests that are coming through for each pod. That's going to be very important because as your Kubernetes environment starts to scale and grow, you may need to adjust the load balancing algorithm to evenly distribute those requests coming through and hitting each pod so you don't overwhelm each pod, given a pod. So playing with that load balancing algorithm could come into play. But being able to see, is there one pod potentially that's getting all the requests, this helps you identify that and go back and figure out what you need to adjust. So then we have total number of requests. We have requests per second. You'll see this change just in a moment here. And any responses. So if you start to get any, 400 errors or 500 errors, this will pop up and let you know you got some errors. It's a big red block. You can't miss it. And then we're going to start taking a look at the number of connections, your traffic traversing through it. If you're doing any health checks, server checks, we'll let you know whether they fail or pass with the health monitors. And then finally, probably one of the most important pieces is your response time. So that's the response time that it takes from NGINX to the upstream pod when it's talking to it. So we have some guidelines, and anything under 10 milliseconds that you see and below is good. If you start to see this number actually jump up, say above 25, 30, there's a bit of slowing that's actually going to be going on. There's something slowing down on that. And NGINX has always been very fast. And what happens to 10 oftentimes than not is that NGINX is so fast, it actually will send more traffic to the upstream that it's capable of handling, so that you may need to go and either adjust your app or tune NGINX so it doesn't overwhelm the backends. Okay.
Hey, so Jason, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes, you may.
We've got a couple questions in the chat that I think we should probably cover now instead of waiting until the Q&A. So one is, are you monitoring specific services on this demo?
So this case here, yes, we are. We're actually we're pointing to the service, but monitoring the endpoints. So what we do is we actually monitor the IP for the endpoints. That allows us to basically do health checks against those endpoints directly instead of the service IP, the service cluster IP is as opposed to the endpoint. So in this case here, we're actually monitoring the endpoints.
Awesome. And then there's another comment about how the dashboard should have a stream of URLs hit and marking suspicious ones in red.
Say that again one more time, Jen.
Says the dashboard should have a stream of URLs hit and marking suspicious ones in red.
Okay, so that's more on the security side of things, which we have something else for. In this case here, we're focusing primarily on the ingress. It's what's going on with the ingress as well as the connectivity to the back to the upstream pods. So that's probably another one as well we can do, Jen. But in this case here, we're focusing on ingress, the health of the ingress, and the health of the pods that we're actually routing traffic to that ingress has been configured for.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. So just to kind of give you an idea real quick, I'm gonna just send some traffic to each one of these real quick. And we're gonna start with coffee, which is at the top here. And really what you're gonna notice here is that these numbers start to change, all right? All these up here. So why that's critical is if I keep running this is that you'll notice here that I can see if my pods are actually responding correctly, both in the request per second, the amount of traffic received, and also the response time. So you can see that I've got 3 pods that are actually in this response time. One's a little high. I mean, 10's still fine within the normal range here, but my other ones are really good at 5 and 4 milliseconds. So this runs in real time. So as in a real production environment, you can pull this dashboard up and you will see all the traffic that is being collected and sent through ingress, and then what the response time is on the upstreams. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same one for T, which is down here. I'll scroll a little bit here. And you're gonna see it changes as well. In this case here, I've got 5 total pods I'm routing traffic to, and you can see the distribution that's being occurred across all of them, as well as the response times on the right over here. In this case, everything looks in the green, but as I said, if you start to see your response time number start to creep up to 20 plus or more, there's potential an issue in your cluster with those particular pods. So that's actually how we actually narrow down, hey, everything's working on the NGINX side, but maybe there's something wrong with the upstream pods that we're actually sending traffic to. So very handy. One of the things that we do when we're working with customers that are testing out, NGINX Plus for ingress, is we turn this on for them. And the great thing about the Plus dashboard is it's basically enabled by default. You just have to do a little bit of configuration if you needed to change anything, but it's not anything extravagant or difficult you have to do to turn on. It's just there. You just basically have to use it, expose it properly, and you can even lock this down. So you have to log into the dashboard with proper credentials before you can actually access it and view it. So there's lots of things provided to our customers so they can take advantage of this capability. All right. So very handy. I'll just quickly touch up as well. HTTP zones, these are just my zones. So if you're familiar with NGINX zones, these are the zones that we configured for our upstream groups that allow the worker, that have shared memory, that allow the worker connections to know about the connections that are traversing through NGINX and provide, basically sharing that across those worker processes.
So Jason, we had talked a little bit before about what the dashboard would look like if something's not performing well. Mm-hmm. You want to go break some stuff?
Yeah, I was thinking about doing that. I was trying to figure out how to do it, but it's very obvious. I can tell you that. And what essentially happens is that if you have a pod or pods that actually are not responsive at all, it's a big red horizontal line across the entire horizontal plane. So it goes red across the board. We can't talk to this pod. We mark it as down. And the NGINX Ingress knows that's not a healthy pod. It will not route traffic to it until it comes back up or a new pod spawn, because it may be that pod just dies outright and a new pod's spun up, which we can actually talk about as well, because NGINX can automatically update these upstream groups dynamically without any interaction as a new pod spawns as part of that service. So basically we can query the service, we can find the endpoint IPs, and then populate these upstream groups so we know we have more pods to actually route traffic to. And then there's more things you can do as well if you wanted to with the NGINX Plus, where you can do like a delayed start, basically have custom checks to say we want to make sure that the pod is up for 25 seconds, passes a certain amount of health checks before we route traffic to it, because we don't want to overwhelm it or start routing traffic to it when it's not ready. So some of the things you can do to kind of fine tune your environment as your pods are scaling up and down. All right. Perfect. Okay. So that's the NGINX Plus dashboard. Like I said, it's very handy. It's I would say it's the first triage you want to go to when if you start to have problems at some point. Helps narrow down where you need to start looking. Is it at the ingress layer or is it on the backend layer? Because that's going to be a critical piece, because NGINX may be running perfectly fine, but a lot of times what happens is that backend pods start to not respond as fast or as well. So this is a great way to come in and say, am I getting any errors? And what are my response times looking like? Is anything marked down or red? Then you can quickly know, like, you can quickly start knowing where you need to look.
Great. Thank you, Jason.
Yep, you're welcome. So I'm going to transition now to the Grafana dashboard. Let me pull this up here. All right.
Yeah. And so just a quick check-in for anyone who's come in since we started. We are about 2/3 of the way through. We've kind of had a conversation about the issues here, looked at the NGINX Plus exclusive feature. We'll talk a bit more about what you can do if it's an open source Ingress controller later. And then now we're going to look at the use case of if you need to diagnose why you're running out of resources. And so for this section, we're going to look at these Grafana dashboards that come with NGINX Ingress Controller as well as NGINX Service Mesh, which we haven't talked about the Service Mesh very much, but we have pre-built dashboards that come with each. And then we're going to have Ward jump in and talk about Grafana Loki. And so Jason, back to you.
Yeah, it's great. So for what we did for this live demo was we built NGINX Ingress with Prometheus, and then Prometheus scrapes the NGINX Plus Ingress controller metrics and sends it off to Grafana. And it makes it really easy to set this up, because we really want to make it easy for our customers to be able to take advantage of these the metrics we provide here. So in this case here, we installed Ingress. We configured it to listen on the Prometheus port. So basically Prometheus, which is installed in the cluster, comes by and scrapes the metrics, and then that metric data gets sent off to Grafana. And that's what we're looking at here. And the great thing about this is that, like, I'm not a Grafana expert, but what made this really simple was we have a pre-built dashboard that you basically can import into your Grafana instance, and this is exactly what it looks like. So this is, from the moment you bring it in and you can start bringing in data, this gives you visibility into your Ingress control. And it's fairly, I'll say, simplistic for the most part, but it gives you really good insight into what NGINX Ingress is grabbing, and then what you can further see leveraging Prometheus and Grafana. Okay, so obviously green is good, so we want to make sure it's successful. We want to make sure it's up. What's my total request volume that's going through? My total number of reloads. So that's actually like, is NGINX doing reloads on any particular new changes you're putting in Ingress? This will count that. And any reload errors, which is going to be critical, because if you push an incorrect config or you miss something config, this gives you a quick insight, say, I've got errors. Network input output, which is great. And that's, I think, which is great about Grafana, is that The Plus dashboard will tell you really good information about ingress in the pods. Grafana takes it a step further by tracking more information, including your network input output, the HTTP request volume. So all that information is being scraped by Ingress, the Ingress Controller, and Prometheus, but then you get that in this nice, pretty interface in Grafana. Okay.
Sorry to stop you there. There's a question from Albo. When are the statistic reset? What happens after restart? Is the data persisted somewhere? So Albo, when you deploy Grafana, say for example via Helm, which I usually do, there's an option where you can use a persistent disk volume. I believe it's a Kubernetes object that you attach to that once you deploy it, so that let's say you reset Grafana, you can reuse that persistent disk volume, and with that Grafana deployment, and then keep going from there.
For the persistent volume, you probably know more, Ward, but the idea being was you have a persistent volume that stores the data for the Grafana database.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So just to kind of keep going here. So the nice thing is I can see my success rates. If I have any errors, what my upstream looks like. So that's going to be pretty critical as well. And in a real world environment, when you have lots of traffic traversing through Ingress, and quite honestly, the reality is you're going to have more than one Ingress controller for the most part for several reasons. One is high availability, and two is to evenly distribute that traffic across Ingress controllers, so you're not running on a single point of failure. So Grafana makes it easy to aggregate this in one place and see all the traffic across all your Ingress controllers, instead of have, as Amir said, I don't want to get to the command line. I don't want to start looking at logs. There's tons of stuff that's going on. So take me to one easy place to start looking at everything, which is the combination of NGINX, Prometheus, and Grafana. And you can dive down in any of these graphs. I mean, it's as simple as, and I'll let Ward do more, but I can highlight everything. And I mean, that's pretty important information, especially if you're looking for errors. I can start looking at any success rates. If I get some bad stuff, I can start to see a timeline, time frame, how many I have, etc. So a more in-depth per panel that you can configure within Grafana. Right, and just to quickly note out here at the, there's one here for SSL that I did not have at this time here, but we can capture SSL metrics as well. So if you want to look at like your SSL handshakes, any problems with those handshakes, any errors, that'll also be relevant in this panel at the bottom. Well, in this case, it's a pre-built dashboard, but you can move this panel wherever you want.
Hey, Jason, quick question for you. In terms of the granularity of the time scale here, do you know what the smallest time unit is that we can show here?
I'm going to defer to Ward on that. I don't know. Since Ward is the Grafana guy, I'll let him take that one.
Yeah, so by default, so this is Prometheus based, so that means that storage is in Prometheus, and Prometheus has a scrape interval by default of 15 seconds. So that is the granularity that you can get. However, that is configurable. So if you want to do 1 second, that can also be possible. But you do need to realize that every second, your endpoint will be scraped. So that will create extra load, and that might not create additional value. And it also ties nicely in with the logs. For example, there is a lot of granular information in logs. So I'll show you in a bit how to also create some metrics with a little bit more higher resolution, but you use the logs for that using Loki.
Yeah, so it really depends why you need that data. If you don't actually need it down to the second, then don't do it.
Yeah, so typically I say Prometheus is great for kind of the high level aggregate view over long periods of time. So we have folks that are using, in the case Grafana Cloud, where they have multiple years of metrics, and they can actually compare previous year performance of their cluster, of their NGINX Ingress controller with the year before. And especially when with e-commerce companies where they have Black Friday and that kind of stuff, it's very important to be able to correlate those two time windows to see how you're performing compared to last year's benchmarks. And that is really the key use case for Prometheus. And then for those long time ranges, that 15 seconds is actually great, especially if you can do that over multiple years of retention.
And then we have a question in the chat from Nosa. the NGINX metrics on Grafana, are they pre-populated directly from the scrape, or did you manually select and populate it? So Jason, why don't you, this might be a good point to transition into how you built this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll move that over here. To the answer to the question is that I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was enable Prometheus on the appropriate port, have Prometheus installed, and it took care of the rest. I mean, the one thing that, we expose a certain amount of metrics in NGINX Ingress automatically. And by just basically enabling, and I'll show you that here in the document here, and by basically turning that on and defining the port, those metrics automatically get scraped by Prometheus and then shipped off to Grafana. So makes it really easy. Okay, so this is what we did when we built out this environment here, and there was the 3 components, right? Well, there's 4. First, you got to have a working cluster, so that's going to be priority number 1. You got to build that first, and then what I did, in my case here, I built out in order of Prometheus, Grafana, and then NGINX. And honestly, I mean, I figured that just made the most sense, just to put Prometheus in there to be prepared for the metrics. Put Grafana in there to prepare that for Prometheus to send that to Grafana, and then the final piece is the NGINX deploy it, where Prometheus can actually scrape the metrics and then send it off to Grafana. So this was it. So in this case here, these are all going to be documented for people to run here, and I took the approach to install this via Helm. You can install, this case here just made sense just from keeping everything in sync. I could do everything through Helm. Obviously, for NGINX Ingress, you can install it via Helm. We have an operator, we have manifest. It really comes down to personal preference or requirements you may have in your work. But in this case here, for simplicity and just a ease of use, I just built this all with Helm. And I documented the steps so people can take this and reuse this. And if we just walk through the guide here, it's pretty straightforward. Here's the Prometheus part, how you actually add the repos. Right off the Helm, you go helm.sh and you can go to the repos and you can pull it right off their page here. It's very simple to do. And then you install your release, whatever, in this case here, whatever your release is. I think I named mine Prometheus logs or something like that. So Helm install the name of your release and then point to the repo. And then I did the same thing for Grafana, right? It worked well, it was easy. So I'm gonna keep it simple and just keep going down the line with Grafana. As you can see here, here's this same setup, how you install Grafana. Same philosophy as well, just name your release. And then obviously, at the very end, once I finish this out, I can get a quick overview of everything that's installed by a Helm by just running Helm ls-a, which goes across all the namespaces. So for NGINX, I did install this via Helm as well. If you have not done that before, it's pretty easy to do. There's just a couple things that you need to do ahead of time. In this case, create the namespace you want to deploy it into. You can basically create whatever you want. In my case here, I just created a namespace called NGINX Ingress. Just to keep in line how we do it per our documentation is that we always make a namespace called NGINX.ingress. And then what you do is, in this case here, is that here's the install command. And it's really what it is I'm installing it. That's my release name. I'm putting it into that namespace. And then I fill out my values file. And the values file is here. I minimize this as much as possible so I can reduce extra complexity, but it's straightforward here. And if you look at this, I'm installing the NGINX. Calling NGINX Plus. I'm saying I want to use the NGINX Plus version. One thing when you do NGINX Plus, the deployment's a little bit different because you have to build your own custom container that you'll be leveraging our certain key to reach out to a repository. And then we just recommend that you push that to a private repository that you can pull down as part of any deployment that you're going to be doing. And you would just fill in the appropriate repository in this field. Okay. And then, your service account, I mean, these are all documented on our webpage. You can change these values wherever you want. There's a link at the bottom here. You'll see here that these are all the chart values you can actually adjust for your values file. And then real quick, as I touched on, I mentioned that I just basically turned on Prometheus by those 3 lines, and that's it. That's all I had to do is I had to basically turn on Prometheus, tell it to open up port 9113, and now those NGINX Ingress metrics are automatically exposed, and Prometheus will scoop those up and send those off to Grafana, and it makes it very simple.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and flip over to Word to check out Loki. Awesome name.
It is. I really like the dashboards, and I really like also that all those metrics from the NGINX controller are exposed as Prometheus metrics, because that really allows us to do all kinds of cool stuff to correlate it with logs. So let me dive into a little bit of the logs, because metrics are great, right, for the high level view, because in the dashboard, when something is wrong, you would indeed see a big red line or a number and immediately know, okay, there's something wrong that I need to take action in. However, for some errors, to actually find the root cause, you need to go a little bit deeper, and you need to have additional detail. And for that, you have logs. And especially on a microservice architecture with a lot of services, a lot of logs, it can be very challenging, right, to be able to get that data streaming and crapping from all your services as real time. So that is definitely something we want to improve here. And at Grafana Labs, for that, we created this curated OSS stack. So what I'm going to show today is a quick demo using our Grafana Cloud, which actually has a free tier. So for the people that just want to check it out for maybe their Raspberry Pi environment or their own Kubernetes cluster, we allow you to run Grafana, tempo. You can store your Prometheus metrics in Cortex, that's our metric store, and of course use Grafana Loki. And our goal is really to, with this observability stack, to have an opinionated approach and make correlation between metrics, logs, and traces as straightforward as possible. So today, like I mentioned, I'm going to focus today on Grafana Loki for a quick bit, and is really designed for correlation with Prometheus metrics. So it's great really for finding that needle in a haystack. And the fun thing is that Loki actually also allows you to create Prometheus-style metrics on top of your log data. And this dashboard, this is an example, I'll give you the link later on. This is actually created, all those metrics are created from your logs from NGINX. So that's pretty cool. All right, enough slides for me. Let's go to the demo. Let me show you a little bit on how this works. So like I mentioned, that Loki is pretty good for the needle in a haystack queries. So I have a pet website, which is of course running on NGINX. And this website has, of course, a lot of page views. One of the pages is around coffee. And I actually can do a live tailing of all the users hitting a page that has somewhere in the log line coffee. So that can be, of course, I'm now using coffee as an example, but that could also be an IP address, an host, etc. Then, so this is really the needle in a haystack search, but you can also do stuff like metrics queries. So, for example, I can actually count in increments of 5 minutes how many folks were actually looking for game on the website. So here you see that at this interval there were about 23 requests to a page that has in the URL game. So that is pretty cool. So we can do the needle in a haystack queries, and we can do metric queries. And if you really go crazy with it, you can get this type of dashboard. So this is just based on regular NGINX data, and all this data that you see is actually coming from the logs. And we're doing all kinds of cool stuff that is also using high cardinality queries. So like top user agent, HTTP reverse. That's really hard to do with Prometheus, because Prometheus is really good for those high level overviews, but for the additional detail on high cardinality, there Loki definitely has a good solution. That's definitely a good solution for that one. If we look at logs from the NGINX plus NGINX controller, so I installed it this morning and I can vouch for it. It's pretty easy to create your own custom image for NGINX plus. And so I created that, and here I'm also getting all live all my NGINX plus NGINX logs. And I can, for example, do a needle in a haystack for errors. So you saw that early this morning, I ran into a few errors that I created. But I can, for example, also live tail, and let me press that one. So if I run, this is the live view. And I'm now live streaming the logs as they come in. And yeah, I have a very simple cafe example website. And that's, I think, also the example that was used before in the demos. And here you see those events coming in. And I can actually filter them here also on the command line to make sure that I'm all seeing the logs that I'm really interested in. So this is pretty cool. And using this concept, I can actually also create a quick dashboard. So this is what I prepared for today, where I'm using the logs and, for example, calculating an aggregate on the byte sent. And again, this is a very high cardinality value in my logs in here, and I don't need any spelling controller for this. Okay, let me see if I can turn it off. There we go. Disable forever. That's not interesting here. So here, what I'm doing is, okay, I'm getting NGINX logs in JSON format. I'm checking, okay, I'm only interested in the ones that have status 200. And then I say, hey, give me the byte sent and calculate the sum over time for that. And then that allows me to display that here in a Grafana panel. Similar thing I do with the top page request here, where I do a top K query. So for the folks that are familiar with Prometheus, this looks exactly the same here. So here, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I'm just doing a top K. So give me all the values for path and request query that have a very high request volume. So you see here that our coffee endpoint on our website is the most requested one, is the most popular one. And like I mentioned, we can do all kinds of high cardinality queries. So with the NGINX plus Prometheus exports, you can definitely get all kinds of stuff like 95 percentile metrics, histograms out of it. But with Loki, in addendum, you can also do stuff like, okay, for this specific IP address, or in my case, for all the pages that contain coffee, I want to calculate the 95 percentile specifically on the fly. And that is definitely possible here with Loki and the NGINX Ingress logs data. So that's pretty cool. Of course, I can also take a look at the raw access logs, or have a panel of the errors, and of course using the Grafana Explorer to actually slice and dice this any further, or if needed, actually correlating it with my metrics. So I can actually select here Prometheus metrics, so I don't have the NGINX Prometheus ingesting here, but if I would be able to correlate metrics on logs at the same time. So that's pretty cool. All right, so if you're interested in having a similar demo or similar dashboard for your NGINX metrics, definitely check out the Grafana dashboard directory, because there I uploaded the Loki Web Analytics Dashboard Showcase. So the same dashboard that I showed you in just a bit ago is available for download, and you can just use it on your Ingress controller or your NGINX web server metrics logs. All right, that was just a very quick view at what Loki can do, and yeah, look forward to what you can do with it.
Very cool.
That's great. Thank you. All right, time for some Q&A. We've hit some of these questions already. Jason or Amir, can you talk briefly about the NGINX open source option for live monitoring with regard to the stub status?
Yeah, you want to take that? You want that, Amir?
I mean, I'll start with that, and you can
Sure.
follow up. So the NGINX open source dashboard is limited in metrics. I believe it supports 5 metrics or something like that. The NGINX Plus dashboard is real time, just like Jason showed, and it's over 100 metrics, if not more. Now that's as far as visibility for the NGINX Plus dashboard. Now, the NGINX open source Ingress controller does include the Prometheus scraper, all those metrics that we covered in Grafana. That's supported on open source because it exports those metrics to Prometheus server, and then you can add a source to the Grafana, and you can see all of those metrics. So really, what you get with Plus is the real-time dashboard, being able to see, per pod, seeing the retries, how many errors, if it's unhealthy, stuff like that, and being able to see the pod scale on the fly as you make changes to your Kubernetes environment. So really, it's the real-time value you're getting with NGINX Plus. Other than that, open source works fine with Grafana. There's no difference between Plus and open source.
Yep, same configuration. I mean, you basically expose Prometheus, you basically enable Prometheus in however you're configuring it, the proper port, and open source will do just fine for Prometheus to come by, scrape the metrics, and send it off to Grafana.
All right, we have a couple questions for Ward from NOSA. Does Grafana have data source capabilities for organizations running an ELK stack? And a follow-up to that, is Grafana a rival to ELK?
Great questions. So we are a big tent. So that means that we actually announced, I think that was end of last week, a partnership with Elasticsearch on their Elasticsearch plugin. We already had an Elasticsearch plugin for Grafana, and that was really popular already. But now this partnership actually allows us to even expand, making even the plugin even better for Grafana. So in that sense, we're not looking at it from a kind of a competitor perspective, because we have Loki. But like I said, we're big friends with Elasticsearch. And yeah, we definitely will announce more partnerships as we go on, because we really like to work together with a lot of those companies. And yeah, are we a rival? Not so much. I do think Loki will... there's a sweet spot for Loki that I think is better than handled than, for example, Elasticsearch does, and more cost effective, or it's easier to manage. Especially correlating with Prometheus metrics, I think Loki is designed for it, so that makes it a natural fit. However, there are definitely use cases where I see Elk being much better fit than Loki. So again, I just want to pick, at Grafana Labs, we want folks just to pick the right tool for the right job and be flexible in that. And that sometimes that's Elk and sometimes that's Loki.
And then a different question related, does it support different data sources, or does it rely on Prometheus data? And this is regarding Loki.
So Loki relies on log data, and you can send it from every system that you want. So you can actually send it from Logstash if you want. But basically anything that output logs can be tailed by the agent or Fluent Bit or whatever, and you can just send it to Loki.
Cool. All right, let's see here. I'm going to scroll through some of the questions that we missed from earlier. Just curious, Nosa again, is Grafana able to pick all this ingress data on the dashboard? I think that was when we were on the initial Grafana dashboard.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the contents is. So my standard answer would be yes, but maybe there's a difference between what the NGINX dashboards expose and Prometheus. But if there's no difference, then there's also no difference in the amount of data that you can show on a Grafana dashboard.
All right, and then we've got a question about Flutter. You know, preference around using Flutter as opposed to using the tool on a phone. So I think that's again for Ward. Talk to us about
Yeah, so I needed to look it up. So Flutter is, I think, a kind of a cross-compile solution for mobile apps. And if I just answer the question, hey, Grafana, I want to see Grafana as good as possible on my mobile app, then the answer is we're focused really right now on creating a responsive experience that is good. Is it as good as a native mobile app? No, it isn't. However, we are very careful where we spend our resources and our time. And currently, we think we can add the most value, focusing really on the Grafana project and making Grafana as good as possible to use on a mobile phone or any other device that you might have.
Okay, and then if someone wanted to get started with Loki, you know, where do you suggest they do some research? How do they get started?
Yeah, so definitely check out some of the videos that are on our channel to get a little bit of sense of Loki. There's also at grafana.com, you can sign up for a free account, and that's a forever free tier that we recently announced. And you can just start sending your logs. So the instructions are included, and there's documentation included, and definitely check it out and just play around and see if it's something you can use. And yeah, I definitely think it's a great fit for having those Prometheus and logs from your NGINX mesh services and ingress controllers and ingesting that into Loki and Prometheus. So let me know how it looks like, and definitely ping me on Twitter if you have a nice dashboard that you want to show that you created on top of that.
All right, and then Jason or Amir, how do people get started with the NGINX Plus version of the ingress controller?
I can take that one, Amir, if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Since you took the last one. So actually pretty easy. You can go, we'll put a link in, I think Jen just can put a link in there, but essentially just go right to that URL there and you can sign up for a trial to give NGINX Plus give it a test run, and then we'll provide you with the certain key that you need to use to build your container image, and that'll allow you to build that and then deploy that in your Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, and that comes free with NGINX App Protect, which is our WAF. So definitely check that out. I think we've got another question following up on the Grafana train. Do you have a curated list of metrics that organizations could define when it comes to monitoring microservices and networks?
That is a good question. So we're working hard on providing a little bit more out-of-the-box experience with our open source observability stack. So one of the key tenets of open source is people will say, yeah, everything is possible, but some assembly required. And we definitely, as Grafana, we open source really important to us. We sometimes notice that assembly required can indeed be hinder or be a little bit of a threshold, or I'm not sure how to say that in English, a blocker between if you're just new to the technology and you just want to, okay, just give me the best practices. So we do definitely have some integrations that we're giving you on the Grafana cloud, and those integrations basically allow you to say, okay, I want to monitor my NGINX cluster. Click, you get the agent configuration that you can deploy on your Kubernetes cluster, and it will automatically also import the NGINX dashboards by default, making sure that you have a good onboarding experience with that specific data source. And that's for NGINX, that's also for other services like Redis and that kind of stuff, or for Kubernetes. And there's definitely a lot there already, but we're working also very hard to even create more and more opinionated installations that can help you, especially when you're just starting out with new technology.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's the end of our questions. So I want to do a quick plug. We're doing another live stream at the end of March. It's on our YouTube channel. So it's Get Resilient Microservices Apps with Advanced Traffic Splitting. So we'll be looking at how you can do advanced traffic splitting, both from the ingress controller as well as the service mesh. And then we also are running a survey for an hour after this session. We really want to find out from everyone here what you thought of it. So Marco, if you can toss up, oh, I think I lost my screen share. There we go. Hold on. Bear with me. It timed out. Okay. So we've got a brief survey. We want to find out what you thought about the content today. We also want to learn more about what you're doing in Kubernetes. I want to say emphatically, this is not going to be used by sales or marketing. It's really for our team to understand better what you're doing, and then provide you the opportunity, if you're interested, in working with our product management team to shape the roadmap in the future. And then we're also going to be, as part of this, doing a swag raffle. We have this kind of fun little spring bundle going along with our Microservices March theme. We've got a sticker sheet, a tote bag, and a planter box that comes with one of 5 different seed packs. I think it's basil, mint, lavender, a couple others. So please do take our survey. Again, it's going to be open for another hour. And with that said, I think we're pretty much done. So Ward, thank you for staying up a little later. I think it's probably into your dinner a bit right now.
It's just bringing kids to bedtime almost for me.
Yeah, mine is running around upstairs right now. He popped in earlier.
But it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much, Jan, for hosting. It was a blast.
Great, thank you. And Jason and Amir, always a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Had a great time.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Bye.
Cheers, folks. Bye.